Welcome back to another episode of the Super Conscious Soul podcast, a playland for conscious leaders to plug into sacred self care and gain the resources to live a fully expressed and joyful life. Today's episode is a very nourishing one, especially for those of you who want to learn how to navigate through relationships and learn how to have a conscious relationship, not just with your significant other, but more importantly with yourself. Today's guest is Stefanos Sifandos, and Stefanos is a relationship alchemist, international speaker, and author who facilitates transformational growth through neural empowerment practices. And what he does best is he integrates the Eastern and Western methods and philosophies to help you to enhance your relationship, enhance the quality of your life, and bring them closer to its highest potential. So what I love about Stefanos is he practices what he preaches, and that he is the only person that I know aside from myself in my real life that studies the Bhagavad Gita. So we connected on that and we talked about it a little bit in this episode, but we talked about some really awesome things as well that I believe you are going to dive into even more and relate to. We talk about finding your authentic self and learning how to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, learning what the difference is between the real ego and the false ego, learning how to communicate with each other in relationships. So I'm just really excited for you to dive into this episode. There is so much juice to squeeze out of it. And I also recorded this while I was in Bali going through my own really deep transformation. So I'm excited to, listen back and dive into it with you. So before we get into the episode, we're going to go into something new that we're adding on this podcast, which is a 1-minute meditation. So I'm going to allow you to get into a comfortable posture. If you are in movement right now, whether you're running or whether you're driving, just be really aware and present of the frequency and the music, but obviously don't be closing your eyes and running or closing your eyes and driving. You know what to do. So guide yourself and listen to this 1-minute meditation, and then the episode will begin. Listen to the sound of the bell. Guide your awareness to the cave of the heart. It's not somewhere you're imagining, it's where you are, within the seat of the soul. Acknowledge that you are the eternal witness, consciousness, transcending through time and space, here to expand and express. Become aware of the body that you occupy. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Slowly, slowly find your center. Harnessing this calming, collected, grounded energy as an anchor to live a balanced and joyful life. Honor the divinity within you. And whenever you're ready, open your eyes. Welcome back. I am really looking forward to have you tune into this episode because I am interviewing Stefanos Sifandos, and he is a relationship expert. I wanted to have him on the podcast for a lot of reasons, and one of the main ones is because he thrives on helping people talk about their relationships and how they can get into a place of harmony, and then how that relationship between the man and the woman can truly impact the world. So I love the way that Stefano shows up. I love his groundedness and this energy and presence about him. I had the opportunity to connect with him at Chris Harder's Mastermind, and there's a lot that I can understand about him just through his presence. And so I'm really looking forward to have you tune in and just be fully present in this episode as you hear Stefanos share more about his background and how he can help you to thrive in your own relationship. So Stefanos, thank you so much for being a guest on Dear Self and Co.
Thank you so much for having me here, Sandy. Deeply appreciated.
So I want to start off and ask you some soul fire questions. So let's start with, where are you from? And you can talk about where you were born and where you are now.
Yes, I'm a child of the earth.
I love
I was born.
I've never gotten the answer.
A child of this cosmos. Okay, so that being said, I was born in Western Australia, East Fremantle. Spent a very short period of time there, and then spent a few years in Greece, where my father's family is from. And that was difficult economically. So we came back to Australia and would go back and forth between Australia and Greece, but largely grew up in Australia, hence the accent. And so that's where I suppose that's where I'm from.
I love it. What do you feel like you are serving your highest and greatest good? When do you feel like you are serving in your highest and greatest good?
Oh, when I'm in gratitude. When I'm deeply engrossed in gratitude, the best way to answer that is that I've had equally as profound experiences being immersed in intentional gratitude as I have been in some of the strongest plant medicine in the world, and or breath work. It's incredible.
Being in gratitude, which leads to my next question too. What are you currently embracing?
Oh, so much. Let me tap into what's really in my scope right now. The next iteration of me, the next iteration of my service and how I show up.
I love that. And we can dive back into that a little bit more.
Mm.
When do you feel the most present?
When I'm in gratitude.
Yeah, I think you kind of answered that. What is one thing that you did recently where you faced your fears?
Oh, late last year, I embarked on a psychosomatic, sexual somatic journey. It was a 4 month journey that I intentionally put myself through as a form of up-leveling, evolving, expanding my own sense of self and consciousness and understanding and connection to self. And that was deeply turbulent and very confronting. One of, if not the, I don't want to say the most, but equally some of the most confronting deep inner work I've done. And it took me to some pretty dark places, and I'm very grateful I had amazing support in my life to be able to be a guiding and shining light for me in that space.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Wow. And then my last question, what do you like to do for fun?
Oh, so many things. Gaze into the eyes of my queen, move my body, be in nature, be in the ocean, read, spend time with amazing human beings and my dearer friends. Have fun and just watch very light movies, even action movies, action, adventure, fantasy. I love that. Just create, speak to existence, creation and new ideas and innovations on how to expand human consciousness, how to evolve our socio-cultural, socio-economic practices. Whilst this is also part of my service, it's fun for me as well. Challenging myself is fun. There are so many things that buying new clothes is good fun. So many things that are fun. I like fashion. I like nice things per se. So that's always fun as well. So many different things.
Oh, I love that list. Love it. So on the topic of creation, let's dive in and talk about the creation of you. So can you
Oh,
tell us a little bit about your background and how you got so immersed into the field of relationships? I can imagine that
mm,
it started off with a really deep relationship that you've had to explore with yourself. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about
most definitely. Our greatest voids become our greatest values.
that.
And so for
Powerful.
me, yeah, it was, and the experience of that was, and still is, of course. And so for me, experienced a great deal of disharmony in my family life, in my upbringing, violence and emotional abuse, and just volatility, like a hell of a lot of volatility. And so in that volatility, became disconnected from my truth self, my authentic self. And just to clarify something on authenticity, we're authentic at every moment of
Mm,
every moment, essentially. And what I mean by my authentic self is the self that really is outside of the clutter and outside of the wounding and outside of the pain and isn't acting from an unconscious spaces. Because when we consistently act from unconscious spaces, yes, we're being authentic in that moment, and we're not really living to our true potential. We're living in a lower vibration.
mm,
And so for me, I lived in lies, and I lived a very disconnected life. And what I mean by that is that I was consistently unhappy. My actions didn't match my words. They didn't match my thoughts. They didn't match my emotions. I wasn't happy in the life that I was living, and I felt like a hamster on a wheel. You know, or that old analogy of you're just stuck in the rat race. And so moving out of that was really powerful for me because it gave me an opportunity to live my life completely differently. And that was super scary as well because I didn't know, we don't know what we don't know. And generally we fear what we don't know. And so there was a great deal of fear there, me stepping into the mystery, stepping into the unknown. And now the parallel here was that the mystery and the unknown of life is very much synonymous with the feminine. And so I had to step into the feminine. I had to step into this feminine expressive energy of receiving. And by being in the unknown, I would have to receive what the unknown gives me. And so I got to practice being very different. I got to practice being a healthier masculine self because I had to hold that ability to receive and not distort that receiving, not distort the gifts and the wisdom that the unknown was giving me, be continent with that, and learn how to completely relate to myself differently, to certain constructs differently, and to people differently, particularly in intimate relationship, because that was very distorted for me. That was unhealthy, shadow-based. I was unfaithful in most of my relationships and wasn't really speaking my truth. I was tensile and agitated and frustrated, and my aggressiveness I would take out on others. I was fighting a lot as a younger man, physically fighting. I was just so disorientated. I kept blaming others and not really being in healthy relationship or ownership of my actions. And so when all of that came to a head and I was able to make the choice to live a different life, which was a journey over many years and still is, of course, that was when life began to very much flourish for me in new ways. And I began to see the world from a place of hope, intelligent hope, intelligent hope and opportunity.
mm. Wow.
Mm.
I want to go back to what you said about you don't know what you don't know, because I find that where the lines get a little bit blurry is when you have lived these lies and you've been stuck in these habit patterns for so long, and you view life through a lens that is very limiting. How do you get to a point where your awareness is beyond that, where you can see yourself and just be able to witness yourself beyond that? Can you kind of share a description of what it was like for you and the kinds of lives that you were living and how that eventually led you to become aware?
Well, I spent a great, so that unknown for me was liberating and highly constrictive at the same time, temporarily, of course. And so I made a decision to, and I hope I'm answering your question, responding to your question in alignment here. I made a decision to not live the life that I was living. And therefore, I had to explore all these facets of my own self: emotional, spiritual, physical, relational, cognitive, and mental, psychological. And at certain points through that journey, I really thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was entering a state of bipolar or schizophrenia. Because everything was so different to me, because I was actively, intentionally making the choice to not experience life from the old wounding that I had and the unconscious paradigms that I had previously. And seeing the world through this new lens meant that I also had to take ownership of my actions and my thoughts and my belief system. So I had to explore all of that. And there was a great deal of unknown, because so much of that was unconscious. So I made the unconscious conscious. So we don't know what we don't know until we know. And we know what we know when we intentionally move in such a way that allows us to know what there is to be known.
Wow.
And so that, all in short, that means make a choice to explore the patterns in our lives that really lead us to the lives that we live. And I wasn't doing that. And so when I did that, a lot came to the surface, and there were multiple ego deaths that I experienced. And that, for me, once I got comfortable with being uncomfortable, and it was extremely unpleasant at the beginning. And the more I remained in that unpleasantness, the more the unpleasantness became tolerable, and the tolerable nature of those experiences became more comfortable. And I began then to learn from them, because the moment we enter into comfortable states, we become open. I call this an open state of being. I became open and receptive to the learning and the teaching that moment and that posture, that facing of the unknown that became known, was able to give me. And so then I developed new sets of tools and skills and perspectives, vantage points to see the world and feel the world. And then I was able to take action on those new perspectives, because I felt free to do so, because I wasn't restricted by the singular paradigm that I thought I had to live my life by, which was to live in secrecy, to not be seen, to not be seen for who I truly was, to not show myself, to not be vulnerable, to not be real, because that left me open, because that was also a sign of weakness. All these sociocultural collective paradigms and nuances and narratives around what it meant to be a man as well. And that didn't mean that I was going to be vulnerable and vomit all my emotion anywhere and everywhere. It meant that I could then choose to be very real with select people that I trusted and respected and revered. And it also meant that I could learn to be self-reliant first, understand myself, be more self-aware, be my own source of inspiration, and then ask for others for a perspective once I was more continent with my words, thoughts, deeds, emotional body. And that gave me greater insight into who I was.
Wow, that was a very powerful response. So thank you for that. And all of what you're saying, really what I hear out of that is living in yoga, union with your highest self. That's what it sounds like to me. So I know that one of the things that we have in common is that you also study the Eastern philosophy and the Bhagavad Gita. So you talked about the ego death. Can you talk about some of the things that you've learned from exploring these Eastern philosophies and how it helped you to kill the ego?
Humility and humbleness play a major role in this. Major role. For me personally, I had to come face to face with so much of what I thought was true, and release that truth, release that idea that this is the way it had to be, and also acknowledge that, hey, I haven't really behaved in integrity. I haven't behaved in alignment. I've hurt people, maybe not purposely, but the intention was to hide and to lie, to not tell the truth, and to be dishonest. And as a byproduct of that, there was great shame and guilt that came with that. And so dealing with that immediately affects the ego, because the ego says, let's project that. Let's externally blame and shame. Let's not take that on ourselves. That's too deep. That's too painful. We don't want to hold that. It's too much for us. So let's blame someone else for our behavior. It's easy to do that. And when the more conscious and aware aspects of self say, whoa, 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 we've been doing that all our lives. This is the conversation I was having with myself. I've been doing this all my life. At some point, I really need to take fucking ownership and responsibility and step into personal power, because the more I blame and shame externally, the more I'm giving my power away. I'm never going to make any changes. I'm just going to keep living the same life and fucking repeat. And that's not what I want. I'm hurting others. I'm hurting myself. I'm frustrated all the time. The source of my frustration is not being remedied. I've got to do something different. Now, Einstein says, you do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. It's a sign of insanity. And so I had to shift, and therefore I had to take responsibility, and the ego took a shot for that, and it hurt, and it was painful. It was deeply, deeply painful. And there's the real ego and there's the false ego. The real ego, or the real self, is our very essence, the consciousness or the tirium that makes us aware and awake to our reality. The false ego is a false identity. And that's, for us, that's crafted to preserve the sense of being, the most significant and the most important of all time, that we perceive to be the most important of all time. So essentially, it's a narcissistic search for being loved, validated, and appreciated. So it's, because that comes from a very selfish place.
Survival.
There's no, it comes from a place of scarcity. There's no space for humility. There's no space for giving. There's no space for openness. I didn't have that. So until I surrendered that, then I was able and took ownership of that and moved through the process of moving through the guilt and the shame. That was powerful. And it's interesting because that's generally what we refer to the ego as, is this vanity. And so you mentioned the Bhagavad Gita. So the Gita would further describe the subtleties of the ego and how it manifests moment to moment in our thoughts, words, and our deeds. And we associate all of that with who we truly are. But the reality is that's not who we truly are. So I had to let go of that. And that's not a disowning of self or actions. That's not not taking ownership of actions. It's saying that there is a deeper essence that resides within self. Yes, these are my actions. Yes, I'm responsible for that in this physical form. Yes, I take responsibility for that. And here's how I'm moving through that. And there's more to me than just that. Wow. And we do that from a place of humility. And for me, it was a tug of war. I'm in humility, I'm in humbleness, I'm in arrogance, I'm in ego, and there's this tug of war. And this concept seems very like it's a far stretched concept when we first think about it. But when we begin to study our own lives, and we clearly isolate these episodes of these egoic, superficial tendencies and how they manifest in our personality, either explicitly or implicitly, more subtly, unconsciously, we begin to shift our complete perspective on what we consider is possible in life. And that's where I began to really learn so much more about me.
Ooh, wow. Gosh, that was a dense response. Thank you for sharing that. Wow. So how would you say that you defined being a man back then, and how do you define being a man now?
Back then, I was hyper selfish, incontinent in my words, in my thoughts, in my deeds. I was inconsiderate, spiritually, relationally, and emotionally immature. And I'm not having a go at myself. I just want to be really clear. I'm not judging myself or being angry at myself for this. I'm simply observing how I essentially was behaving. I was dishonest as a man. I was living in lies. And how I describe myself now is someone that lives in truth, someone that carries willingness to explore not only the unknown, but pain and fear, as well as willingness to celebrate joy. and willingness to go beyond what I think and feel I'm capable of and step into a greater place of leadership. I'm a more authentic leader now. I'm a more balanced and harmonious leader now of self and of those that are in my sphere. I am more open-minded and open-hearted now. Because I'm in greater integrity, and this is really interesting. So I was watching a podcast this morning, listening to a podcast this morning whilst I was moving. I was training, exercising, moving in the sun, and Terry Crews was speaking, and I really love the way he presents himself. If you haven't seen any of he's just released a book as well. I haven't read his book though. But I like him as an actor. He's always funny, and
yes,
he's very engaging, and there's this depth to him as well. And so he's speaking about this incident that he had when he was with his wife, and he was traveling at that time and she was at home, and they were having a conversation. It was an intense, heated argument. And she said to him, "What is it about Terry Crews that I don't know? What don't I know about this man that I've been married to for 20 years?" And he put the phone down. He said he put the phone down, and he had this voice in his head saying, tell her about the unfaithfulness, tell her everything. And he deliberated on this, and he sat with this. He was in bed tossing and turning, and he picked the phone back up and he told her. Now, I won't go into the rest of the story because it's not too relevant, but at that moment, I stopped training, I stopped moving, which is generally unlike me. When I'm in that mode, I keep going for really for time. And I stopped and thought to myself, what does Christine not, that's my fiance, what does Christine not know about me? And I said to myself, she knows everything. She knows everything that not only needs to be known, but that I can tell her. Like, there's nothing, for the first time in my life, I have nothing to hide around my fears, around my past, around what I think and feel. I'm completely transparent and open. And that's not before, of course, I'm confident with who I am and my own self-counsel, and I'm self-reliant, and that's something that I practice. I don't always get it right. I didn't always get anything right. And I recover when I don't get it right far quicker than I used to. I'm less harsh on myself. I was so incompassionate not compassionate to myself. I was so not empathetic with myself. I was harsh and judgmental and critical with who I was. My inner voice was, if I spoke to others like I spoke to myself back then, I would not have any of the amazing friends that I have in my life. And so that there's some other, I'm so far more compassionate with myself, not as judgmental. I don't compartmentalize myself in harsh, rigid ways like I used to at all. Am I sometimes harsh with myself? Yes. Far and few between those occasions occur. And when they do, the recovery is really fast. And I'm transparent.
Yes. Oh, so two questions that kind of come up after hearing you say that is, one, how do you think women can hold the space for the men in their lives to experience this journey of healing and coming to self like you did? And then two, as a man, how do you best communicate with your woman in a way that is just truth when for so long you've been living this lie?
So that first question, I want to address something immediately, is that I want to acknowledge the oppression that women have faced over thousands of years. I want to acknowledge the disregard that they have experienced, the collective attitude of less than, perceived to be less than, which couldn't be further from the truth, the systemic conditioning, judgment, and bias against women. And so much of the pain and suffering that they've experienced as a group of people. And so what I'm about to say next is not necessarily easy. And to answer your first question is how can women support and meet men? Some women would say, fuck that, we've been oppressed for so long. Why should we be of service to men in any capacity? And whilst I don't agree with that, I get it. I get it. I really do. And it's natural for us as human beings that when we've been oppressed, when we've been discriminated against, subjugated, when we've been even ridiculed and rejected in so many different ways, when we've been taken advantage of, we've been used and abused in so many different ways, it's very natural for us to say no. The reality is we need each other as a species, as a humanity. We need each other more than ever. We can't polarize each other. And so to answer your question immediately, if I were to say two things, it would be non-judgment and compassion. Mm. And I also acknowledge that that's really difficult for some people, for some women. And my experience is that I am very blessed, something I do not take for granted. And yes, I've made choices that have hurt others, particularly women, and I've made choices that have hurt myself massively. And I'm deeply remorseful for that, and I've moved through that. And I truly am not the same person that I was. And when I've been met with non-judgment and compassion, which I have been by so many different women, mentors, friends, partners, particularly my current partner now, wow, like I have grown so much. I've been so much more dedicated and devoted to my own path, my own journey, my own growth, and the support of others and giving others and showing up in the best way possible so that I can be present, that I can be a stable. That's been one of my massive, I was unsafe and unstable when you asked me what the differences were as well. Now I consider myself to be safe and stable because I have clarity and I'm concise and discerning with the choices that I make. I'm not confused. And so it's an honor for me to be clear. And if I'm not clear, I say, hey, I'm not clear, but I'm clear about that. I'm very discerning, highly discerning. And so to come from that place, it's such an honor to be that person for myself and my own journey, and also for others. It's an honor bestowed upon me, and I do not take that lightly. And so therefore, the way I choose to move through the world now is to repay that back, is to give and give and give that without wanting or expecting something in return. And so when I'm met with non-judgment and compassion, I flourish, and I'm able to give that back, not only to that person that's giving that to me, but to others as well. And I see it in the work that I do with men and with women. When women show up in a compassionate, non-judgmental way and they're not attached to the outcome, wow, some fucking magic happens, especially when the men are ready to receive that. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my work is teaching men how to receive, teaching women how to give. Men generally, the masculine is very good at giving, generally effective at giving. Women are generally effective at receiving, the energy of that. And so reversing those poles, but in a harmonious way, teaching people how to do that in a contemporary construct is such a joy, such a joy. So back to your original question, compassion and non-judgment. And of course, patience, persistence also accompanies that as well, naturally. And the second question was, could you repeat the second question, please? I know
Yes. How do you best communicate with the women once you were ready to go through the journey that you did? How do you get transparent and honest like the way that you did with your partner?
Oh, men need to be willing and they need to be ready. They need to be willing, they need to be ready, and they need to. Sorry?
We talked about this at the beginning before I hit the record button. You said willing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they need to be ready. And again, I'll come back to that non-attachment, and it's easier said than done. So let's peel that back a little bit. Like it's easy-ish to say, be willing, be ready, and be non-attached. In other words, if you speak your truth and your woman meets you with disdain or rejection or humiliation, because that can happen because of her own wounding and her own pain, and you're attached to that, and that affects you emotionally, that affects your functionality in the world, that affects your decision to then tell the truth. Well, I better not tell the truth because I'm just going to be met with rejection and humiliation. That's old wounding coming up. And so that's what I mean by non-attached. Like, you can be indifferent and neutral to what the response or the reaction is. Now, that's easy to say, but what's peeled back behind that means that a man has done his work. He is self-aware. He has gone into his previous childhood wounding. Most of us haven't, not all of us, but the vast majority of us do, has gone into his wounding, has gone into his belief system, has extrapolated all of that, has pulled that out of himself, has examined that, has looked at himself, has made more conscious and aware choices of who he wants to be, has forgiven the past before he can, again, another easy statement, forgive, let go, release. Before someone can do that, they have to feel. They have to feel the anger in a healthy way, feel the sadness, feel the guilt, feel the remorse, feel the shame, not suppress it, not bottle it, not avoid, not isolate, not divide oneself, but feel it all. And so before they can forgive, before they can show up, before they can be non-attached, they have to feel their feelings. Hashtag feel the feels. They have to be vulnerable with themselves. They have to be real and raw and authentic with themselves, synonymous terms with vulnerability. They have to then show up, speak the truth for the sake of speaking the truth because it's self-liberating, and not be attached to what your partner says or what the people in your life have to say to that. And when you then show up strong in that posture, because men are strong physical beings and they have a capacity to be strong, resilient, mental and emotional beings, and they're not attached and they continue just to show up, means that they're not triggered because they've done the deep inner work themselves. That's power. So that's the back end of that. The front end is tell the truth, be non-attached, be willing, be patient, and be persistent. And be persistent in a healthy way, not in a narcissistic way, or be persistent in a freakish way or a pathological way. Be persistent by respecting your boundaries and the boundaries of others, of course, by understanding what their needs are, ask questions, be open, be curious, explore, have a sincere vested interest in what the other person needs, and speak and tell your truth. And act from a place of integrity. Integrity and authenticity means inner world matches your outer world. Your thoughts, your models of reality, your belief systems, your emotions, they match your actions, your behavior, your interrelating. There's no disconnect. There's no something's different in the inside and it's completely different on the outside. And you're able to express that in a healthy, connected way that doesn't isolate others or push others away or hurt others. So peeling that back again, inclusivity in our decision-making and longevity in our decision-making. That's powerful.
Very powerful. And, you know, as you're sharing this too, I'm thinking about how, yes, we're talking about the male, but there are also so many of us women, right? Because we all honor the masculine and feminine. There are a lot of us women who have not been in alignment with our feminine, and we have taken on the roles and the responsibility of what men often do, and we operate in our masculine, and we, you know, those are the type A women, and I see a lot of women like this. They're type A, they're hustle, they're go, and you know, they're suited up and working on executive levels, and not really listening to their intuition, which is their feminine power. So even as you're saying all of this, I'm also thinking about the women who experience the same thing, living in their masculine nature. So can you talk about how can we honor both? How can we switch between the masculine and the feminine as a man and a woman? Because it's kind of the same thing, right?
There's carryover for sure. And so I'll use the example that, or I'll utilize and just continue off the example that you gave. And so let me ask you a question, if that's okay.
Of course.
You're a powerful woman. You're connected to your emotions. You're doing amazing things in the world, building business. You're serving community. You're taking massive action. Some would say that in terms of expressive characteristics, that you're driven, you're ambitious. they're masculine traits, right? That doesn't mean that they're reserved for men only, of course. They're masculine traits, correct? Would you agree?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. And so whilst you're taking the bull by the horns and in your business, you're focused, another masculine trait, you're very present to what's unraveling, you're innovative and you're pivoting when you need to, you're consistently focused on building business, so creating and expanding. Tell me, if you don't mind, in your intimate relationship, how do you show up?
In my intimate relationship to myself or my significant other?
Significant other.
I show up in a way that is in union to myself. I allow my thoughts, my words, my deeds to unite with my inner wisdom. And that's something that, as being born as a female, that is innate in me, is that inner wisdom. So in the every moment, when I can navigate using my intuition, right? If you, the Bhagavad Gita talks about the buddhi, the conscience, if I can navigate using that, then I know in each moment I can show up in compassion with my significant other, in understanding and patience, and hold that space for him to explore wherever it is that he has to explore.
I'll be direct now. This is great. Would you say you're less or more feminine in your intimate relationship with your significant other than you are in your business?
I would say, oh, that's such a good question. Am I less or more feminine in my intimate relationship than I am in my business?
Or another way to ask it, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say more of your feminine comes out when you're in your intimate relationship?
Absolutely.
Or, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
the other question is similar, a little bit different. Do you want more of that to come out in your intimate relationship?
I don't think there could ever be enough. Yeah,
That's
I don't.
great. And so when you really step into whatever it is, that however you define your feminine, okay, in your intimate relationship, is it your preference that your man, because you're in a heterosexual relationship, I hope that was okay that I shared that.
Of course.
But I think, yeah, you're on social media and people see that you're with another handsome, beautiful man. Do you want him? Is it your preference that he shows up in his healthy masculine?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Okay. And how do you want him to, define what it means for him to show up in his healthy masculine when you're in your healthy feminine? Just a few adjectives, descriptive words.
Embodiment of strength.
Yep. Great.
Assertive in a very compassionate way. Patient.
Good. Side note to listeners, men can be strong and assertive and not be subjugating and autocratic or condescending and still be compassionate. Yes. And that's something that I advocate for massively. But keep going. Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make that distinction.
Let's see what else. Just bold in his own rights.
Great. So I get that you're one person out of 3.5, one female out of 3.5 billion. Okay. Thereabouts. So I get that the sample group isn't exactly high, but here it is. The reality is that most women want this balance in polarity, and most men want this balance in polarity as well. And so the skill comes in us stepping into these, not these predetermined roles or even these natural roles. Some of them are part natural. Some are really being defined more and more by culture. So when I say natural, I mean large biological influence And there is, like, men and women, the constitution of men and women, biologically and physiologically and neurologically, is different. That's the reality.
Yes.
I witness this not so much every day, but on a monthly basis with the way the woman in my life is, how it affects her body physiologically, not even so much her mood. Put that aside for a moment, or her emotional state, or her expressive state and so forth. More just how it affects her physiology. Men don't experience that. We experience different fluctuations in our hormones and how that affects our behavior from adolescence into adulthood and so forth. And so we have to take into account there are, to some degree, natural abiding states that influence our ability to relate and how we express and emote and be in the world. But what you've just beautifully described is this transition that in your business, you basically describe what your man is and how you are in your business. But if you took that into your relationship, how do you think your relationship would be? If you weren't able to adjust, and if he wasn't able to express compassion and be a pillar of strength for you and be stable and be assertive and have a lot of life figured out and be a leader and lead laterally and lead himself and carry confidence and carry courage, how do you think you'd relate to him? Would you be attracted to him?
If this didn't happen?
Yeah.
No, it would cause friction. It would make it more difficult for me to see myself within him.
Yeah. And so, and I honor you so much for, and I don't mean to interview you, of course. I don't have my own podcast.
Oh, I love this because I know so many women are, I'm happy to do this because I know so many women can relate to.
But I just know you're so honest. I really appreciate your rawness, and I just know that you're going to just speak truth, and I love that. And so we come back to that original question: is that we need to get the fuck over that. I don't honestly, I don't know if there's. I'm a massive advocate for sameness. I'm a massive advocate for unity consciousness, for us coming together and breaking these barriers of fucking discrimination and difference. And I also recognize that difference is a beautiful thing to be celebrated, and we are different, and that's okay. We need to get over this thing that being different is healthy. We are different on many levels. And guess what? We're really very much the same on many levels. If we're talking about Advaita Vedanta, if we're talking about a new non-dual approach to life, we're talking about something that the Bhagavad Gita would advocate, is that there is this unity consciousness. We are all one. That full stop. But that's also too much for most of us to really grasp, to say, hey, Sandy, guess what? You're me and I'm you. Right now, it's just me having a conversation with me. When you start delving into quantum physics starts speaking massively to this as well. Let's not go on a tangent, because I don't want to do that and confuse anyone and confuse myself, because quantum physics is fucking complicated.
Oh yeah, you go deep.
For me, it is.
Go into a rabbit hole.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But so what I'm saying is that it's okay to be different. And so when we bring a certain polarity to a relationship, there's balance and there's harmony more than anything else, because balance exists all the time. Homeostasis is always there. It's just that we don't recognize it. And when we don't recognize it, we don't act in accordance with it. And so then we move out of it and we disconnect ourselves from it. So the beauty is that when we behave in a way that complements our opposite, guess what happens? We flourish. We move into homeostasis.
Yes.
And so there's nothing wrong with a woman being in the world, in socioeconomic, sociocultural world, being driven, being assertive, being focused, building, creating multi-million-dollar businesses. And then being compassionate, being nurturing, receiving, being receptive, being in greater flow, connecting to her own nature, however that is for her, when she's in intimate relationship with another, and allow herself to be in that receptive flow, to be treated like a queen. I don't know any other woman that would not want to do that. And any woman that does is looking then for a passive man. If there is a woman that wants to be dominant, wants to be assertive and wants to take care of business in the family life and so forth. It's not about being wrong or right. And because it's not wrong at all. Let me be really clear on that. But she needs an opposite. A man will struggle to be with a woman that is assertive and hyper driven in the actual intimacy of the relationship I'm talking about, in that dynamic, and that is wanting to lead all the time and not willing to be led, and has to make all the decisions, and has to be discerning, and has to carry the confidence and the weight of the relationship and the growth of the relationship on her shoulders only. If that's who she wants to be in intimate relationship with another, that's not wrong or right. That's a beautiful thing too. It's that she will definitely have to, for the relationship to really flourish and work and to be healthy, she's going to need a more passive man. She's going to need a man that assumes a different role that complements that role. And so at some point, that's not going to really be fulfilling for either party. And we're talking normative heterosexual relationships here as well. I realize that there's far more than just a normative heterosexual relationship, and there's more than just binary gender relationships, and there is more than just binary gender as well. And so I'm really, really clear on that. And so this applies to any relationship or relationships, monogamous, non-monogamous, homosexual, however you identify yourself as a gender class. So I think there's 70 plus gender class attributes now that you can attribute yourself as. That's irrelevant. It's this balance or this harmony of complementary opposites. That's what we need to move into.
So
and go on, sorry.
So I wanted to say, how would you say you show up in your relationship, and how is this exactly what you're talking about right now unfolded in your own relationship with your fiance, Christine?
Yeah. So Christine, for any of you that know Christine, she's a really powerful woman in the world. Like she has an amazingly successful business, and for her to get to that place, she's had to take on the attributes of a very masculine society. She's had to be driven. She's had to be, she had to carry ingenuity within her. She's had to be hyper focused. She's had to be resilient and just persistent and tenacious and all of that, take massive action. And I love that about her. And when we're together in an intimate setting, I'm not just referring to sexual intimacy or emotional intimacy, and that as well, of course, but when we're in our family life, say, there is a difference in how we show up. We complement each other. We're always making sure if there's an imbalance there, we're speaking to it. I need to understand that Christine spent 9 years on her own. I'll give you a very simple example. We go to a restaurant and she's doing all the ordering. Not so much for me, but for herself and so forth. And I'll gently say to her, darling, let me do it for you. Let me order for you. It makes me feel good and I enjoy that. And she's like, oh, okay. And it's not that she's being submissive or weak or anything, or that she's not capable of ordering her own fucking food. Of course she is. She's survived and thrived for all of her life. Like, she's really capable of all of that. And there's also something really beautiful and special that when I take lead on that as well. And if I were to remind her in a way, say, hey, I'm the fucking man, let me order food. Like, how's that going to go down? How does that even serve? That's not healthy. That's me being arrogant. That's me trying to be dominant and expecting the woman in my life to be submissive. But if I come from a place of, hey, I really want to just, or tell me what you want and I want to order it for you. Because there's something about chivalry that is really beautiful.
Yes.
Especially chivalry in contemporary times. And I really feel that 9 out of 10 women would really agree with that. And I could be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong. And it's not about being wrong or right. From my experience and the women that I've worked with, they love that. When I paint them a scenario, it's like, oh, I love a man to do that. I love a man to take that.
Yes,
lead.
I agree.
And it's not a sexist thing. It's that men are better or men are capable and you can't order your food or you can't put the trash out it's not about that. Or I can't cook for myself because I'm a man and my woman has to cook for me. There's something really beautiful when my woman, and when I say my woman, I don't own her. I'm not in possession of her. It's an endearing term and there's nothing malice behind it. Be really clear on that. And so when she cooks me a meal, I feel so nurtured and so loved. When I'm sore, as I've hurt myself training or doing something, and she's moving around and getting me ointments and getting me a pill for this and making an appointment there. And I'm capable of doing all that. And it feels really, really beautiful to be loved and cared for and nurtured for in that way, in this cultural expression. And, you know, when we go back to primal times, when a man had injured himself, maybe hunting, and the community would go around him, other men would be hunting, and the women would tend to him and help his knee or help his leg. And there's something really beautiful, ingrained and nurturing about that. And so there's an element of biology and unconscious patterning, it's in our DNA almost, that there is certain ways to be that really help us flourish in relationship. And it's not wrong or right. And it's okay to allow others to do things for us in particular ways. That's really, really mindful and helpful to the flourishing of the relationship. I go back to that example of being in a restaurant. And when I say that to Christine, darling, let me order. I want to order. She's more than fine with that. Again, if I said it from a place of aberrance, then no, that wouldn't go down, because the way I'm delivering a message is not healthy. It's coming from a place of dominance and ego. And that's extreme behavior, and that's not healthy for anyone. But from that place, it's beautiful. The grandest gesture, like if your man just says, hey, you free Thursday night? Yeah, I am. Good. Leave it free from 5 p.m. onwards. I'm taking you out. We're going to watch a movie and I'm taking you to dinner. Someone's give you a simple example. Like, wow, I love that. Oh, it's date night on Saturday night. Oh, what do we do?
Right?
Yeah. Initiative, that's exactly right. The masculine construct. Yes. Or what do we do? Oh, I don't know, darling. You figure it out. And as a woman, you're like, I want to figure it out. And sometimes you can, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But imagine you were constantly doing that, and your man showed no interest, took no initiative, took no drive, didn't take action. Does that feel great?
Well, let's talk about that. How do you keep the relationship from going dull?
Oh, it's a great question. And so it's going to be really different for everyone. And the first thing I can say is get clear on your values. So as individuals, get clear on your values. As a relationship, get clear on your values. And effort. Willingness, so come back to willingness. Willingness to exert and apply effort. And if you don't like the word effort, you replace it with another word. But the reality is, nothing that's ever worth pursuing or having or embodying or experiencing has not come without intention, attention, and energy input. Full stop. That's it. It's as simple as that. And then do it. You value the relationship, be in the relationship. If you love both going to the movies, I use that as an example, or going to the zoo or going to new places or going for hikes in nature, then make sure you schedule that into your calendar every week. We live in a quote unquote busy world. And so then we have technology, so leverage it, put it in your partner's, as a man, take action, put it in your partner's calendar and put it in yours. And as a woman, you can do that too. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not you being hyper masculine. It's calm down. It's going to be okay. It's if you're allowed to do that, it's good for you to do that too. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that when the polarity becomes excessive, or the reverse of the polarity becomes excessive, that then issues can arise.
Wow. I love to end it on that note, even though I know that you and I could just keep on going. You probably had to suppress what you wanted to say a few times, but if you are listening to this right now and you are feeling all the feels and you're taking a lot away from this, share with us one takeaway. You can tag Stefanos at Stefanos on Instagram, and you can tag myself, Sandy Bo. What were some of your takeaways? What were some aha moments for you? Did this reveal some things for you that inspired you to go back into your own relationship with yourself so that you can then heal the relationship with your significant other and then with the world? Stefanos, I want to thank you, because this was incredibly dense, incredibly transformational, incredibly raw from the both of us. And I know it's going to help so many people to improve the way that they evolve in the world.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here and to just share with you as well. I really enjoyed it, and I'm very excited to see you again, actually in next week online, and of course in a couple of months.
Yes. So my last question for you is, what is your dear self declaration? You could just speak truth to yourself right now and say, dear
Mm.
self, what would you say?
Dear self, I appreciate you immensely. Will continue to honor you and be willing to do whatever is required to show up in this world and to self as the most grandest, most present version of self.
Powerful. And then where can people find you if they're really loving your work and they want to work with you?
Yeah, stephsafandos.com or stefanossafandos.com. And of course, my social media handles, you reach me there, Stephanos Safandos on Instagram or Facebook.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sandy.